Good evening everybody and welcome to rounds 10, 11 and 12 of Season 2 of the 2014 BSR Carrera Cup on iRacing.com here, live on BSR TV on YouTube. Myself, Scott Woodwiss and Marcus Narris will be calling the shots for the next three races of the championship, which find us at the wonderful surroundings of Silverstone in Northamptonshire on the national layouts, where we've seen the cars race on the Grand Prix layout back in Season 1. Now we return once again to the shorter layout, which is mainly used by the British Touring Car Championship and other formulas. So, Marcus, moving into this championship, into this race weekend at Silverstone, coming off the back of a rather intriguing weekend at Daytona. We had obviously some great racing at Daytona, of course, on being one of the only roval courses that we make use of in BSR. But what do you think were the main talking points that we took away from last week's racing at Daytona last time out? Because we did have, I think, 2 victories for Alain Tessier, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly. But on the whole, it was pretty intriguing racing, but rather kind of one-sided, with certain drivers favouring the oval and road course layout.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the big thing that came out of last week was the number of people that effectively, either took themselves out of the championship race completely or really damaged their chances in the championship. Daytona is a circuit where you don't see a lot of contact and incidents, and with the exception of poor old Gary Toole, who was fairly roundly molested for the entire evening last week. Lots of people caused problems for themselves. We saw Ashley Sutton having incidents. Stefan Hoog had a couple of incidents he was certainly involved in, coming together with Gary Toole. So it was really more of a case of people possibly taking a short view and pushing really, really hard for the race victory. And as we've seen, it's that long view, that championship drive that seems to be more effective.
Well, if we look at the championship standings coming into rounds 10, 11 and 12, we can see that Stefan Hoog currently leads it with 523 points, and it's only a 2-point advantage over Ian D. Smythe, who himself has 3 victories to Stefan Hoog's 1, meaning that Hoog's results have been a lot more consistent in order for him to retain the championship lead. But don't discount Ian D. Smythe's efforts, because those 2 extra victories have been some rather determined drives in the past few races. As we mentioned, Gary Toole, despite his problems, is still in 3rd place on 440 points, but he really has lost out. He's 83 points back off the lead of Stephen Hoog. So he has got a lot of work to do in these latter races to try and make the ground up that he's lost, thanks to bad luck and getting involved in other people's incidents. Cyril Thomas is 4th for JCL Sim Racing on 417, 3 points ahead of Robert Plumley, and a further 2 points is Plumley ahead of Nick McCarron in 6th, and a 1-point advantage only over William Botha in 7th for Redline Racing. Matt Malone, who of course will be streaming on Twitch this evening, is 8th for Wheel Damage Racing on 404, with Stanismir Zuzov in 9th and Michael Stephen in 10th. And if we look at the Drivers' Championship, Marcus, it's quite surprising that some of the top guys in the championship, the guys who have been putting in some great races and actually won races down the past. I mean, I've counted a couple of 2 or 3 race winners who are outside the top 10. And it's quite surprising that effectively we've got guys like Alain Tessier down in 34th in the championship, Ashley Sutton 30th. I mean, we've got people like Matthew Dalton 12th. They're getting the great results, but because they can't string them together consistently, they're not up there in the championship fight at this point in the season.
Yeah, and that's going to continue to be a problem. We've got a race winner in Matt Dalton, just sitting in 12th at the moment. Ashley Sutton's had a race win this season, as you say, but really struggled with consistency and really struggled last week. Alain Tessier, in fairness to him, he's not contested all of the rounds so far, so I wouldn't expect him to be right up there, but he's certainly putting a good marker down for next season.
And let's also look at the team standings coming into this round as well. We've got Redline Racing on top with 1,739 points, ahead of esimages.net in 2nd with 1,676. 3rd is Epicuri Banana in 3rd with 1,571. Team America Matmut in 4th place with 1,317. And cars are starting to form onto the grid, but I'm still having troubles trying to get in, so Marcus may have to cover once again the first couple of laps.
Yep, I'll dive in. So they're away, the lights have just gone green, and Stefan Hoog gets a great jump there, and Michael Stephen jumped from 3rd place. He's trying to go around the outside for the lead by the looks of it to me, and he's got that done. All the way around the outside. of Stefan Hug. He got away very, very sharply, beat Alan Tessier away from the line. Tessier looks like he had a reasonably poor start, and it's Michael Stephen that's really taken advantage here, and he's sprung into the lead. When we've got contact, oh dear, we've got contact straight away. It's I'm not quite sure who that was. Obviously, not being able to see. Where I'll try and find out who that was who had a problem coming through Beckett's onto the back straight. But as we come to the end of these very, very short laps, this is an 18-lap race here tonight. 53, 54, 55 seconds seems to be the lap time to go. It's still Michael Stephen out front, being put under, though, a lot of pressure by Stefan Hug, who's less than 1/10 of a second behind him. Ian D. Smythe has slotted himself into third place, so as we were saying before the start there, consistency seems to pay off, and as they dive under the bridge now, it's still Stephen from Hug from Smythe. Smythe has a quick look up the inside of Hug there, and unfortunately gets himself very late on the brakes, and he gets caught from behind by Alain Tessier. Not really a lot Tessier could do about that, to be honest with you. He certainly collected Ian D. Smythe, but Smythe took a little bit of a look underneath Stefan Hug's rear wing, and it not necessarily the best place to do that, and as an unfortunate result, he had to change his braking point. Alain Tessier was right behind him, couldn't anticipate the change in braking point, and just gave him the lightest tap from behind. And as we've seen with these cars, all the way at the back, cold tyres after a couple of laps in, these things are like pendulums, and as soon as you get a little bit of rotation at the rear, they go all the way around. So I'm sure very, very disappointed Ian D. Smythe there will start charging his way back up through the field. The nature of the circuit means, though, that he's only running 10 or so seconds off the leaders, albeit down in 17th place, and with a good 16 laps to go, we've seen that a quality driver like Smythe will be able to make a hell of a lot of those places up. So as we run under the bridge again, just on the run down towards Brooklands and into Luffield, Stefan Hug all over the back of Michael Stephen. Personally, if I was Stefan Hug, I'd be wanting to be just that little bit more patient. Michael Stephen has shown this season that he struggled to get to the finish line in some of these races, so certainly Stefan Hug can play the long game, but he won't want to let Michael Stephen get away. Wanting to have a bit of a look back down the field. Alain Tessier now runs in third place. He's 1.1 seconds behind Stefan Hug. Jean-Christophe Goddard is 1.6 seconds back from the lead. Jean-Christophe Goddard, I thought, was a French art house film director, so it's nice to see the diversity we attract in this series. Not someone we've seen running before. The much maligned and much molested last week Gary Toole is running in fifth, a couple of seconds down. Paul Thurston 6th, Tian Darmes in 7th, Dion Phillips in 8th, Andy Shield is 9th, and Richard Wild currently rounds out the top 10. I think we've lost pictures for a while, so I shall keep going. I don't know if you guys can still hear me, but we'll switch to some radio style play-by-play. So as we start at the beginning of lap 5, and they just run through Copse for the 5th time, Michael Stephen still runs out front. He still has Stefan Hug parked right under his rear wing again, and it's a real challenge for Hug in these heavy braking zones, certainly as we go into to Beckett's, which on this national layout isn't the beginning of the lovely left-right-left combination that we normally see. It's quite a tight hairpin. It's a real big braking zone that leads onto the old back straight. And Michael Stephen is definitely starting to hold everyone up now. Hug is doing a cracking job staying behind him, but Tessier is closed in a good half second on this lap, and he's dragging Jean-Christophe Goddard with him. And those two guys look like they're going to be within a lap or so, right up underneath Stefan Hug and Michael Stephen. And as we say that, Stefan Hug has a look around the outside, the fast right-hander in Copse. And Michael Stephen's lost it. He's gone. He's on the gas far too quickly there, and it's just fired him out to the right across the grass. And unfortunately, with the ice grass that we have here on iRacing, there's absolutely no traction. It's just spat him into the wall. I don't think there was contact there. I'm just going to go back and have a look at that. It looked to me like Stefan Hug made a fairly clean move around the outside. Yep, nothing in there at all. Michael Stephen has just got on the gas a little bit too early. He's seen Stefan Hug outside him, and he's just thrown it off the road. So, as prophesied to a certain extent, it looks like Michael Stephen, as I was just about to say it, has just typed in driver's chat for me. He is fast, but he keeps spinning. So as we prophesied earlier on, Michael Stephen, very, very quick, very aggressive driver, very good overtaker, but keeps dumping it off the circuit. And it's nice to see he's got a sense of humour about that. I'd probably be downstairs kicking the cat around the living room, to be honest with you. So as we work halfway through lap 7, Jean-Christophe Goddard, it looks like, has decided he's had enough of being behind Alain Tessier. Tessier's carrying a little bit of front end damage from getting into the back of E&D Smythe earlier on. So I don't know if that's affecting the cooling of his car. We've seen with these RIF 12C track cars that any damage to the front can have a significant impact on the cooling of the car and can affect the engines in the way that they're modelled in iRacing. Obviously there's no engine up front, but that's where all the radiators live, and it can be a real problem if you get any damage. He looked to let Jean-Christophe Goddard pass there without any real resistance, so Goddard sprints past him to take second place. So at the beginning of lap 8, Hug, with the relative comfort for this race of nearly a whole second lead from Jean-Christophe Goddard. Tessier now slots into third, and then we've got a reasonable gap, a big old gap opening up of over 3 seconds back to what is now a 4th position Gary Toole in the Epicuri Banana Machine. And Gary Toole, I'm sure, will be just as keen as possible to get the best result he can do, bearing in mind that he still is in the championship hunt, and he got very, very little out of his trip to Daytona last week. So beginning of lap 9, things as they were up front. Jean-Christophe Goddard is definitely getting closer, however, to Stefan Hug. He took 0.2 of a second out of Hug on that lap and put 0.3 of a second on Tessier. So Tessier obviously struggling for pace. And the two teammates have decided that, as we thought, the best thing to do was for Tessier to let Jean-Christophe Goddard pass so he can get off down the road after Stefan Hug and see if he can take the win for the team. That said, Hug in the esimages.net machine, the BSR TV liveried car, looks very, very strong at the moment. He's hitting the apexes, he's picking his lines very, very well, and I think catching is going to be one thing in this race. Passing is going to be a very, very different proposition. As they come to start the beginning of lap 10, we'll have a look at how that gap is, what that gap is doing. And it's actually gone up by 1/10. Stefan Hug that lap, it was very apparent, as I said, he was hitting every mark and he looked really comfortable, and it looks like he's got the pace under control. And as we say that, Jean-Christophe Goddard is coming under some pressure from Alain Tessier, who obviously has seen that his teammate isn't able to capitalise on that second place and is potentially looking to take that back. As we look slightly further down the field, E&D Smythe, who had that problem earlier on, has settled into the race in what looks to be 21st position, locked in a fairly tight battle with Willem Pinard behind him in 22nd place, with Jose Almeida, who starred in the second race, I believe it was at Daytona last week, had a really, really strong run, just underlying the fact that there's quality all throughout this field. Is just in front of Smythe in 20th place. So from there, Smythe, who comes into this round second in the championship to Stefan Hug, who's our current leader, is really going to struggle to make something pay in this race due to that unfortunate and certainly unintentional contact from Alain Tessier earlier in the race. So back up front, things are evening out a little bit. Stefan Hug leads now with a 0.6 of a second lead from Alain Tessier. Tessier is running quite hard after his teammate now. He's only 4/10 of a second back. So as we look at the top three as they come to the end of lap 11, it's as you were really. It's these top three, Hug, Goddard and Tessier, pulling away from Gary Toole. The gap back to Toole now is over 4 seconds. Toole in 4th place. And he's got a reasonable gap of 1.5 seconds to Dion Phillips behind him. As we see then, the unfortunate, I think that was the unfortunate Scott Malcolm just coming back out of the pits and rejoining the circuit. Scott unfortunately finds himself a lap down in 32nd position, so he's obviously had some adventures there. I'm not sure what's happened, but up top it's very, very close now. Jean-Christophe Goddard is right on the tail of Stefan Hug. I know we're struggling with pictures at the moment, so I'll talk you through it as they come into the Beckett, the Brooklands Luffield complex for the 12th time. Jean-Christophe Goddard is less than 0.2 of a second behind Stefan Hug, and he's got a good 6 laps to try and make this pressure pay. Now we've seen from Hug, he's a very cool customer, and he tends not to struggle and tends not to flap under pressure, but Goddard has got a bit of a run of him here as they come up to the first corner, the fast right-hander at Copse. They're literally nose to tail as they go into what is, for this national circuit, a big stop at Beckett's, a huge stop and a very, very tight switchback right-hander onto the back straight for the run down into Brooklands, and as they pass the very polite Vittorio Soltalamacchia, who gets well out of the way, doesn't want to get involved in this very close race, and again heavy on the brakes. It looks like Hug is able to step on the brakes very, very, very late, a little bit later than Goddard, and that gives him the gap he needs through the corner. He can pick his line. He's not having to drive defensive lines through the corners quite yet, due to being able to get on the brakes a little bit earlier. This start-finish straight, as they're coming to cross the line again to begin lap 14, and it is 0.2 of a second, and this is the only area really where a draft comes into play. And again, Hug a little bit later on the brakes, able to pick his line through the fast right-hander at Copse and keep Jean-Christophe Goddard behind him. And having not having to drive a defensive line means that he can pick his line, and he's very, very fast out of the corners. As we've seen, if you have to start to drive a defensive line, you can't hit your optimal braking points, you can't hit your clipping point, the apex properly, and you're late on the power, and that really gives the guy behind you an advantage. He can pick his line, and we get pictures back, so thanks for sticking with us, guys. Hopefully it's not been too painful listening to my my nasal whine without having the relief of some pictures to look at, but as we begin coming to the end of lap 14 and running to the beginning of lap 15, certainly what we can see is a very, very close race developing here. It's very tight up front, and 5 laps remaining. It's ever so close. Hopefully the cameras will switch shortly to the battle up front, and indeed there we go. So now you're watching what I've been describing. So as you can see, it's now very, very close. We've actually got less than 0.8 of a second between the front three. At one point tonight, Stefan Hug enjoyed over a second lead, so credit to Alain Tessier and Jean-Christophe Goddard. It looks like they called it right, and by letting Goddard into second place, they've really been able to put some pressure on Hug. We've got 4 laps left now, and quite literally Jean-Christophe Goddard is trying absolutely everything he can do to get past Stefan Hug, but he's really not close enough to put Hug under pressure in these braking zones, and Hug's in control here. He looks very, from the body language of the car, he looks very settled, looks very comfortable, and I think only a serious error from Hug is going to give Goddard the opportunity he needs to make the pass, even though the gap is only just under 0.4 of a second. As I say, Hug looks very assured, and you can see from the body language of that car that there's no panic at all behind that steering wheel, and you know, he's doing a great little job there, it has to be said. There is a little bit of traffic ever so slightly further up the road. We've got Matt Malone, who's streaming on Twitch tonight, and Anthony Woodward in front, but to be fair, with only a couple of laps to run as we start lap 17, I don't think those guys are going to come into play. They are a good 5 or 6 seconds up the road, So yeah, I honestly don't think they're going to come into play, but it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this race pans out. As we look backwards, despite the battling, these guys are continuing to grow the gap to Gary Toole in fourth place. Gary is way back in, he's 6.9 seconds behind the leader now, as we see Craig Burleson does get lapped. I think he had a problem at Beckett's and very politely pulled over to the right and let this lead pack past. So Gary Toole is nearly 7 seconds now behind the leader. He's a good 6 seconds behind Alain Tessier in third place. He's managed to open up a couple of seconds himself to Dion Phillips in fifth place. So it's looking fairly settled, to be honest with you, in the top 10, all the way through the top 10. The closest battle is that battle for 10th place, with Darrell Taylor having to manfully resist some pressure from Robert Plumley. And indeed, Robert Plumley's got past Darrell Taylor on this lap, so Robert Plumley will slot himself nicely into 10th place, and Plumley will be delighted with that result. He's improving week after week after week, and is really proving himself to be a consistent front runner in this BSR TV Carrera Cup. It's great to see somebody who perseveres and finally gets the results. So as we come through to the complex at the end of lap 18, this last lap, and as predicted, these guys are just catching the traffic. The traffic isn't going to come into play. It's certainly not going to affect the race in any way, but Stefan, who comfortably, and I say comfortably in terms of posture rather than time, takes the checkered flag, takes the win, and he'll be absolutely delighted with that. He gives a little weave of happiness, just to show how happy he is. Despite it only being a win by 0.4 of a second, so slightly under half a second, Hoog to me never looked in trouble. He looked comfortable, he was placing his car well, and it was a well-earned victory. It takes a very, very cool head not to crack under pressure, certainly around a short, tight circuit like this one. Goddard has to settle for second place, as we said, just under half a second behind Stefan Hoog. Third is Alain Tessier. Gary Toole comes home fourth place, 7.5 seconds behind the leader. Dion Phillips is fifth. Tian Darmez in sixth place, with Paul Thurston just behind him in seventh. Eighth place is Richard Wilde. Andy Shield brings the number 007 machine home in ninth place. And Robert Plumley, with a great move towards the end of the race there on Darrell Taylor, claims 10th place and vitally claims pole position for race 2, as regular viewers of this series will know. We operate a reverse grid structure for the second and third races, and it really does mix things up. And we're going to see Robert Plumley taking a well-deserved and what will be a very, very popular pole position for snatching 10th place on that last lap. So that's it for the first race. As you can see there, it's been an interesting, rather than an outright exciting race, I'd be honest. But certainly there's going to be excitement in races 2 and 3 when we see that reverse grid structure. It really mixes things up a bit. And what is going to be very, very interesting for the championship going forward is Ian D. Smythe recovered himself to 14th place in that first race. And with Stefan Hoog the winner in race 1, he becomes the 10th place starter in race 2. So the two championship leaders will be separated by only 3 cars as we go into race 2. So thanks for sticking with us. I know it was a little bit testing at time. We've had some technical issues tonight. I know we lost Scott early on, and then we lost pictures, but thanks for sticking with us. My name is Marcus Naris. Please stick around here on BSR TV. If you click out and select the next round, which is round 11 of this BSR TV Carrera Cup, please join us on YouTube. The broadcast will be going up shortly. Thanks very much. See you in a bit.